In the cradle of civilization, where the Nile's ancient whispers carried tales of pharaohs and gods, a dynasty born of distant lands found itself entangled with the very soul of Egypt. It was in the year 69 BCE, within the opulent confines of Alexandria, that Cleopatra the Seventh Philopator, the last active pharaoh of Ptolemaic Egypt, drew her first breath. Her lineage, though firmly established on the Egyptian throne for nearly 3 centuries, was not of native Egyptian blood. Instead, it traced back to Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander the Great's most trusted generals, who had claimed Egypt as his prize after the conqueror's untimely death in 323 BCE. This Greek heritage, though often a source of tension, also brought a unique blend of Hellenistic culture and Egyptian tradition to the Ptolemaic court, creating a vibrant, if sometimes volatile, tapestry of power. Alexandria itself, during Cleopatra's formative years, was a city of unparalleled splendor and intellectual fervor. Its lighthouse, the Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, cast its guiding light across the Mediterranean, a beacon for scholars, merchants, and adventurers alike. The great library of Alexandria, a repository of human knowledge, housed countless scrolls, drawing the greatest minds of the age. It was within this environment that Cleopatra's intellect was meticulously honed. Unlike many of her Ptolemaic predecessors, who often embraced only their Greek heritage, Cleopatra was said to have mastered multiple languages, including Egyptian, a rarity among her family. This linguistic prowess, coupled with a sharp mind and an undeniable charisma, would later become crucial tools in her political arsenal. Her early life, however, was far from tranquil. The Ptolemaic Dynasty, despite its outward grandeur, was plagued by internal strife, fratricide, and a constant struggle for control. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII Auletes, known as the flute player for his love of music and less for his statesmanship, faced numerous challenges to his rule. He was often seen as weak and excessively pro-Roman, relying heavily on Roman support to maintain his throne. This dependence on Rome, a burgeoning superpower, foreshadowed the intricate dance of alliances and betrayals that would define Cleopatra's own reign. The political landscape was a treacherous mosaic of shifting loyalties, where siblings often became rivals, and whispers of conspiracy were as common as the desert winds. One lesser-known detail from this period concerns the fate of Ptolemy XII's exiled daughter, Berenice IV. While Ptolemy XII was in Rome attempting to secure his restoration, Berenice seized the throne in Alexandria. Her brief reign, however, was brutally cut short upon her father's return in 55 BCE, aided by Roman legions. Ptolemy XII, with Roman general Aulus Gabinius's assistance, reclaimed his power, and Berenice was executed, a chilling reminder of the ruthless nature of Ptolemaic succession. This event, occurring when Cleopatra was still a young girl, undoubtedly left an indelible mark, illustrating the high stakes of royal power and the ever-present threat of betrayal, even from within one's own family. It was a lesson in survival, etched in blood, long before Cleopatra herself would face similar dilemmas. As Cleopatra matured, she observed the intricate web of diplomacy and manipulation that her father navigated. She witnessed the immense influence Rome wielded, an influence that could both secure and destabilize the Ptolemaic throne. This period also saw the rise of powerful Roman figures like Pompey the Great and Julius Caesar, whose ambitions would inevitably intersect with Egypt's destiny. The whispers of ancient prophecies, often invoked by priests and seers, spoke of a queen who would restore Egypt's glory, a queen who would bridge the gap between the old gods and the new world order. Whether these prophecies were genuine or politically manufactured, they added another layer of mystique to Cleopatra's nascent identity, shaping expectations and fueling both hope and fear within the populace. Historians still disagree whether Cleopatra truly believed herself to be a divine embodiment, a living goddess, or if this was a shrewd political strategy to legitimize her rule in the eyes of her Egyptian subjects. While Ptolemaic pharaohs often adopted divine titles and associated themselves with Egyptian deities, Cleopatra's embrace of the Isis cult, in particular, seemed exceptionally fervent. She was often depicted as the new Isis, a goddess of magic, motherhood, and rebirth. This connection resonated deeply with the Egyptian people, who had long revered Isis. Perhaps she genuinely felt a spiritual kinship with the goddess, or perhaps it was a brilliant move to cultivate loyalty and differentiate herself from her purely Hellenistic predecessors. The truth, like many aspects of her inner world, remains veiled in the sands of time, open to interpretation. Her education was comprehensive, encompassing not only languages but also philosophy, mathematics, and rhetoric. She was trained not merely to rule, but to govern with intelligence and persuasion. The air of Alexandria was thick with intellectual discourse, and Cleopatra, it is said, actively participated in these discussions, demonstrating a keen understanding of complex ideas. This intellectual rigor set her apart, preparing her for the formidable challenges that lay ahead. She was not just a princess. She was a meticulously crafted instrument of power, designed to navigate the treacherous currents of ancient geopolitics. The political machinations surrounding Ptolemy XII's death in 51 BCE thrust Cleopatra, then just 18 years old, onto the throne. Her father's will stipulated that she ruled jointly with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, then about 10 years old. This co-regency, a common Ptolemaic practice, was fraught with peril, designed more to prevent any single ruler from accumulating too much power than to foster harmonious governance. The stage was set for a dramatic power struggle, with Cleopatra, a young woman of extraordinary ambition and intellect, pitted against the entrenched interests of the Alexandrian court and the manipulative forces of her brother's regents. The future of Egypt, and indeed her own survival, hung precariously in the balance. The early years of her reign were marked by immediate conflict with Ptolemy XIII's powerful eunuch regent, Pothinus, who quickly moved to undermine her authority. Pothinus, along with others in her brother's court, saw Cleopatra as a threat to their own influence and sought to marginalize her. This power struggle escalated, leading to Cleopatra's expulsion from Alexandria around 49 BCE. She fled to the eastern borders of Egypt, gathering an army of loyalists and mercenaries, determined to reclaim her rightful place. It was a testament to her resilience and strategic thinking that even at such a young age, she refused to be a passive victim of circumstance. She understood that power was not given. It had to be seized and defended with unwavering resolve. The civil war between Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII coincided with a pivotal moment in Roman history: the bitter conflict between Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great. Pompey, defeated by Caesar at the Battle of Pharsalus, fled to Egypt, seeking refuge, believing he would find sanctuary with the young pharaoh, whose father he had helped restore. However, in a desperate attempt to curry favor with the triumphant Caesar, Ptolemy XIII's advisors made a fateful decision. They had Pompey assassinated upon his arrival, presenting his severed head to Caesar as a gruesome welcome gift. This act, intended to appease Caesar, instead profoundly disgusted him. Caesar, a man of honor and a former ally of Pompey, was appalled by the treachery. His arrival in Alexandria, initially to pursue Pompey, now became an intervention in the Ptolemaic Civil War, SEE, getting the stage for his legendary encounter with Cleopatra. It was during this tense period, with Caesar ensconced in the royal palace and Ptolemy XIII's forces besieging him, that Cleopatra made her daring move. Knowing she could not openly approach Caesar through the lines, she reportedly had herself smuggled into the palace, famously rolled up in a carpet or a laundry sack, and presented to Caesar. This dramatic entrance, whether literal or embellished by history, certainly captured Caesar's attention and imagination. It was a bold, audacious act that immediately showcased her courage, ingenuity, and willingness to take extreme risks to achieve her goals. This meeting marked the true beginning of her legendary reign, intertwining her fate irrevocably with the most powerful man in the Roman world. The ensuing Alexandrian War, though often overshadowed by the personal drama, was a brutal conflict fought within the city itself. Caesar, with limited forces, found himself besieged by Ptolemy XIII's army. Cleopatra, now allied with Caesar, played her part in the struggle. The war culminated in Ptolemy XIII's death, reportedly drowning in the Nile while attempting to escape. With her brother gone, Cleopatra's position was secured, at least for the moment. Caesar, having emerged victorious, solidified her rule, making her the undisputed pharaoh of Egypt. He then installed her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, as her co-ruler, a mere figurehead to satisfy Ptolemaic tradition, but the true power now rested solely with Cleopatra. The relationship that blossomed between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar was more than just a political alliance. It was a passionate affair that produced a son, Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. This union, however controversial, was a testament to Cleopatra's ability to forge powerful personal connections that served her political ambitions. She understood that securing Rome's favor was paramount to Egypt's survival, and who better to secure it with than Rome's most powerful general? Their bond, however, also drew Egypt deeper into the Roman sphere of influence, a delicate balance she constantly sought to maintain. She visited Rome with Caesar, an unprecedented act for an Egyptian pharaoh, where she was received with great pomp and ceremony, further cementing her status as a formidable queen on the world stage. Her time in Rome, though relatively brief, left an impression. She lived in Caesar's villa, her presence a constant source of gossip and fascination for the Roman elite. She was a foreign queen, powerful and alluring, a figure unlike any they had encountered. Perhaps these Roman visits also allowed her to observe the inner workings of Roman politics, the rivalries, the ambitions, and the shifting alliances that defined the Republic. These observations would prove invaluable in her later dealings with Caesar's successors. She was not merely a lover, she was a keen observer, absorbing every detail, every nuance that could aid her in her ultimate goal, the preservation and prosperity of Egypt. The assassination of Julius Caesar on the Ides of March in 44 BCE plunged Rome into chaos and left Cleopatra in a precarious position. Her most powerful patron was gone, and the future of her son, Caesarion, as Caesar's heir, was now uncertain. She quickly departed Rome, returning to Egypt to consolidate her power and prepare for the inevitable power vacuum that would follow Caesar's death. The Roman Republic was tearing itself apart, and Cleopatra, with her keen political instincts, knew that Egypt would need to navigate these turbulent waters with extreme caution. The civil war that erupted between Caesar's assassins and his avengers, led by figures like Mark Antony and Octavian, would once again draw Egypt into the heart of Roman politics. Cleopatra's reign, though marked by dramatic personal relationships, was also characterized by her efforts to restore Egypt's economic prosperity and cultural vibrancy. She oversaw agricultural reforms, promoted trade, and maintained the religious traditions of her land. She understood that a stable and prosperous Egypt was essential for her to maintain her independence from Rome. She was not merely a figurehead. She was an active and engaged ruler, deeply committed to the welfare of her kingdom. Her legacy extends beyond her romantic entanglements. It encompasses her astute governance and her unwavering dedication to her people. The period following Caesar's death was a tense waiting game for Cleopatra. She observed the shifting alliances among the Roman triumvirs, Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, knowing that eventually one of them would emerge as the dominant power. Her strategy was to remain neutral while carefully assessing which faction would offer the most favorable terms for Egypt. She had resources, wealth, and strategic importance that any Roman leader would covet, making her a valuable, if dangerous, ally. The world held its breath, wondering which path the ambitious queen would choose, and how her decision would shape the destiny of both Egypt and Rome. If you're enjoying this, liking and subscribing truly helps and is much appreciated. The air in Alexandria, even within the cool stone walls of the palace, often felt thick with the scent of jasmine and the unspoken anxieties of a dynasty teetering on the edge. Cleopatra, born around 69 BCE, was a child of this opulent yet precarious world. A world where the whispers of the Mediterranean breeze carried tales of both glory and betrayal. Her early years were not those of a pampered princess, but rather a rigorous education in the harsh realities of power. The Ptolemaic Dynasty, though Greek in origin, had embraced many Egyptian customs, including the practice of royal siblings marrying to preserve the purity of their lineage. This tradition, meant to strengthen the throne, often sowed the seeds of bitter rivalry and suspicion among the very individuals it sought to unite. Cleopatra was the third of 6 children born to Ptolemy XII Auletes, a ruler whose nickname, the flute player, hinted at a certain lack of gravitas, or perhaps a penchant for the arts over the brutal machinations of statecraft. He was a king who clung to his throne precariously, often relying on the immense wealth of Egypt and the even greater power of Rome to maintain his position. Growing up, Cleopatra would have observed her father's struggles, the constant need to placate Roman officials, and the ever-present threat of his own people's discontent. These were lessons etched not in scrolls, but in the very fabric of daily life within the palace. Her older sisters, Tryphena and Berenice IV, were figures of both fascination and warning. Tryphena, the eldest, faded from the historical record relatively early, perhaps dying young. But Berenice, the second eldest, became a stark example of the dangers inherent in royal ambition. While Ptolemy XII was away in Rome, desperately seeking financial and military aid to quell a rebellion and reclaim his throne, Berenice seized the opportunity. She declared herself queen, ruling Alexandria for a few tumultuous years. This act of usurpation, a direct challenge to her father's authority, would have profoundly impacted young Cleopatra. It demonstrated that the throne was not a birthright guaranteed, but a prize to be seized, often through ruthless means. When Ptolemy XII finally returned, backed by Roman legions, he swiftly and brutally put down Berenice's reign, reportedly having her executed. The chilling message was clear. Power was absolute, and dissent, even from within one's own family, was met with ultimate retribution. This violent episode, occurring when Cleopatra was likely in her early teens, must have cast a long shadow over her perception of family and loyalty. She witnessed firsthand the fragility of life at the apex of power and the brutal consequences of political maneuvering. It was an education far more profound than any tutor could provide, teaching her that survival in the Ptolemaic court demanded not just intelligence, but an unyielding will and a keen understanding of human nature. Beyond the palace intrigue, Cleopatra's formal education was extensive and rigorous, a hallmark of Ptolemaic royalty. She was fluent in several languages, a rarity even among her own family, who often spoke only Greek. She mastered Greek, the language of her ancestors and the court, but also learned Egyptian, a strategic move that would later endear her to the native population and set her apart from her siblings. She was also proficient in Hebrew, Aramaic, Latin, and possibly others, demonstrating a remarkable intellectual curiosity and a strategic mind even in her youth. This linguistic prowess was not merely an academic pursuit. It was a tool for diplomacy, for understanding diverse cultures, and for connecting with people on a deeper level. Imagine her, a young girl, perhaps practicing her Egyptian pronunciation with a palace servant, or discussing philosophy in Greek with her tutors, all while the undercurrents of political instability swirled around her. Her tutors, likely a mix of Greek schola, Roman and Egyptian priests, would have immersed her in mathematics, philosophy, rhetoric, and astronomy. The Library of Alexandria, a beacon of knowledge in the ancient world, was her intellectual playground. Though its grand halls may have held countless scrolls, perhaps even some of the lost works of ancient wisdom, historians still debate the exact extent of its destruction and whether Cleopatra herself walked among its towering shelves before significant portions were lost to fire and neglect. Regardless, the intellectual atmosphere of Alexandria, with its thriving academic community and diverse population, undoubtedly shaped her worldview. She was not just a princess, she was an intellectual, a scholar in her own right, absorbing knowledge like the fertile Nile soil absorbed its annual floodwaters. Her early life also instilled in her a deep appreciation for the strategic importance of Egypt's resources. The Nile, the lifeblood of the nation, provided fertile land for agriculture, making Egypt the granary of the Mediterranean. This abundance, however, was a double-edged sword, attracting the covetous gaze of powerful empires, most notably Rome. Cleopatra understood that Egypt's wealth was its greatest asset, but also its greatest vulnerability. She learned that controlling the flow of grain, the trade routes, and the loyalty of the people was paramount to maintaining power. The constant presence of Roman influence was another defining feature of her youth. Roman legions were often stationed in Egypt, ostensibly to protect the ruling Ptolemies, but also to exert Rome's growing dominance over the region. Cleopatra would have seen Roman soldiers in the streets, heard their Latin spoken in the markets, and understood that her father's very survival depended on the whims of the distant Roman Senate. This early exposure to Roman power, its military might, and its intricate political system would prove invaluable later in her life. She learned to navigate the complex web of Roman alliances and rivalries, recognizing that Rome was not a monolithic entity, but a collection of powerful individuals and factions, each with their own ambitions. Perhaps one of the lesser-known details of her upbringing is the emphasis placed on public image and ritual. Ptolemaic rulers, despite their Greek heritage, adopted many pharaonic traditions, presenting themselves as divine beings, living gods to their Egyptian subjects. Cleopatra would have participated in elaborate religious ceremonies, dressed in regal attire, and learned the intricate dance of royal representation. These rituals were not mere theatrical performances. They were essential tools for legitimizing her rule and connecting with the deeply religious Egyptian populace. She understood that power was not just about military strength or economic might, but also about perception, about weaving a narrative that inspired awe and loyalty. As her father, Ptolemy XII, grew older and his grip on power weakened, the sibling rivalries within the palace intensified. Cleopatra, along with her younger brothers, Ptolemy XIII and Ptolemy XIV, and her younger sister Arsinoe IV, found themselves caught in a dangerous game of succession. The Ptolemaic custom dictated that the eldest surviving son would inherit the throne, often marrying his sister. This meant that Cleopatra, as a daughter, was destined to be a consort, not a sole ruler. Yet her ambition and intelligence set her apart. She was not content to be a mere figurehead. The political climate of Alexandria was a crucible, forging Cleopatra into the formidable ruler she would become. The city itself, a vibrant melting pot of cultures, religions, and ideas, was a microcosm of the wider Mediterranean world. Its bustling port, a gateway to trade and knowledge, brought in people from across the known world, exposing Cleopatra to diverse perspectives and fostering her cosmopolitan outlook. She would have observed the ebb and flow of merchants, scholars, and diplomats, absorbing the nuances of international relations from a young age. When Ptolemy XII Auletes finally died in 51 BCE, he bequeathed his kingdom to his eldest surviving children, Cleopatra, then around 18 years old, and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was only about 10. Their father's will stipulated that they were to rule jointly, a common Ptolemaic practice. However, the true power behind the young king was a triumvirate of powerful eunuchs and advisors, most notably Pothinus, his regent. These advisors, wary of Cleopatra's intelligence and ambition, quickly moved to undermine her authority. The early years of her co-regency with Ptolemy XIII were marked by a subtle yet relentless struggle for dominance. Cleopatra, with her sharp intellect and understanding of Egyptian customs, attempted to assert her authority. She began issuing coins with her image alone, a bold statement challenging the traditional male-dominated iconography. She also sought to connect with the Egyptian people, learning their language and participating in their religious festivals, a stark contrast to her Greek-speaking predecessors. These actions, however, were perceived as threats by Pothinus and his faction, who saw her as a dangerous rival to their influence over the young king. The tension escalated, culminating in a dramatic power struggle. Pothinus and his allies successfully turned Ptolemy XIII against his older sister, portraying her as a threat to his legitimate rule. They orchestrated her expulsion from Alexandria, forcing her to flee the city she had called home, the palace where she had grown up. This exile, likely around 49 BCE, was a moment of profound vulnerability, but also a turning point. It stripped her of her royal comforts and forced her to rely on her own cunning and resilience. She did not flee empty-handed, however. She gathered loyal supporters and began to raise an army, demonstrating her fierce determination to reclaim her rightful place. Perhaps these walls whispered stories to the stars, echoing the ambitions and fears of those who walked within them. For Cleopatra, her early years were not a sheltered childhood, but a forge. The fires of sibling rivalry, the heat of political intrigue, and the constant pressure of Roman influence shaped her into a woman of extraordinary intellect, unwavering determination, and a profound understanding of power. She learned that the throne was not given, but taken, and that survival in the treacherous world of ancient politics demanded a ruthless dance, a delicate balance of charm, intelligence, and unyielding will. The stage was set for her return, not as a fleeing princess, but as a queen ready to reclaim her destiny. The desert winds, carrying the scent of distant frankincense and the murmur of the Nile, seemed to hold their breath as Julius Caesar's formidable fleet drew closer to Alexandria's shores. Cleopatra, a queen in exile, understood the immense gamble she was about to take. Her brother, Ptolemy XIII, held the city, backed by his powerful regent, Pothinus, and the general Achilles. They had recently committed an act of profound political folly, one that would irrevocably alter the course of Egyptian and Roman history. They had ordered the assassination of Pompey the Great, Caesar's rival, believing it would earn them Caesar's favor. Instead, it had earned them his wrath. Cleopatra knew she could not simply walk into Alexandria. The city was a viper's nest of intrigue, and her life would be forfeit the moment she stepped ashore openly. She needed to reach Caesar to make her plea, to present her case as the rightful ruler of Egypt, chosen by her father's will. The story of how she achieved this has become legendary, a testament to her audacity and strategic brilliance. She was smuggled into the palace, not through grand gates or hidden passages, but famously rolled up in a carpet or a sack, carried by her loyal servant, Apollodorus. This audacious act, a queen, reduced to a clandestine parcel, speaks volumes about her desperation and her courage. Imagine the hushed footsteps, the muffled sounds of the bustling Alexandrian night, as she was carried past unsuspecting guards, her fate hanging by a thread, until she was unrolled before the most powerful man in the Roman world. Caesar, a man of sharp intellect and even sharper ambition, was undoubtedly taken aback. Here was not a cowering supplicant, but a young woman, barely 21, who had risked everything to stand before him. The air in the palace chambers must have crackled with tension and anticipation. He was there to collect a debt owed by Egypt to Rome, and to settle the political chaos that threatened the stability of the region. He found himself confronted by a queen, not just beautiful, but intelligent, articulate, and fiercely determined. She spoke multiple languages, including Greek, the common tongue of the Hellenistic East, and perhaps even a smattering of Egyptian. A rarity among her Ptolemaic predecessors, this linguistic prowess, coupled with her sharp mind, allowed her to engage Caesar on an intellectual level, far beyond mere flattery. Their initial encounter was more than just a political meeting. It was the spark of a profound and complicated alliance. Caesar, a seasoned general and politician in his early 50s, was known for his numerous liaisons, but his relationship with Cleopatra was different. It was born of necessity, certainly, but it blossomed into something deeper, a bond that intertwined their personal and political destinies. He saw in her not just a queen, but a potential ally who could secure Egypt, the breadbasket of Rome, and provide the resources he needed for his ongoing civil wars. She saw in him the ultimate protector, the man who could restore her to her throne and secure her dynasty. The presence of Caesar in Alexandria and his obvious favor towards Cleopatra infuriated Ptolemy XIII and his faction. They saw it as an unacceptable Roman interference in Egyptian affairs and a direct threat to their power. What followed was the Alexandrian War, a brutal conflict fought within the very streets of the city, even threatening the famed Library of Alexandria, though thankfully, the most precious scrolls were saved. This was no mere skirmish. It was a desperate struggle for control, with Roman legions clashing against Egyptian forces. The fighting was fierce, and Caesar himself was often in peril. even having to swim to safety at one point. During this tumultuous period, Cleopatra gave birth to a son, Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. While Caesar never formally acknowledged him as his heir in Rome, the timing of his birth, during the very heart of their alliance, speaks volumes about the depth of their connection. For Cleopatra, Caesarion was her ultimate trump card, a living embodiment of her bond with the most powerful man in the world, securing her lineage and her claim to the throne through Roman might. The war concluded with a decisive Roman victory. Ptolemy XIII, attempting to flee, drowned in the Nile, a rather ignominious end for a pharaoh. With her brother gone, Cleopatra was firmly established on the throne as the sole ruler of Egypt, though she was compelled to share power with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, a mere child, as per Egyptian tradition. This was a strategic move by Caesar, ensuring a nominal co-ruler while leaving the true power in Cleopatra's hands. With the immediate threats quelled and Egypt secured, Caesar lingered in Alexandria for several months, indulging in the luxuries of the palace and the intellectual pursuits offered by the city's renowned scholars. He was fascinated by Egypt, its ancient mysteries, and its immense wealth. He even embarked on a leisurely cruise up the Nile with Cleopatra, a journey that allowed them to deepen their personal connection away from the pressures of court. It was during this time that he likely absorbed much about Egyptian culture and administration, information that would prove useful in his later reforms in Rome. Historians still debate the true nature of their relationship. Was it purely a political calculation on both sides, a mutually beneficial arrangement disguised by affection? Or was there genuine love, a profound intellectual and emotional bond that transcended the pragmatic needs of power? Perhaps it was a complex blend of both. Caesar, a man of immense ambition and experience, found in Cleopatra an equal, a sharp mind who could discuss philosophy, politics, and strategy, not just a beautiful woman. For Cleopatra, Caesar represented not just power, but a connection to the wider, more sophisticated Roman world, a chance to elevate Egypt's standing and secure her dynasty in an ever-changing geopolitical landscape. Their alliance had profound implications for both Egypt and Rome. For Egypt, it meant a period of relative stability under Roman protection, but also a deeper entanglement in Roman affairs. For Rome, it secured a vital grain supply and immense wealth, further cementing its position as the dominant power in the Mediterranean. Cleopatra, through her association with Caesar, had elevated herself and her kingdom to an unprecedented level of influence. She was no longer just the queen of a declining Hellenistic kingdom. She was the consort of Rome's most powerful man, and the mother of his only known son. When Caesar finally departed Alexandria in 47 BC, leaving 3 Roman legions behind to ensure Cleopatra's rule, he returned to Rome a changed man. He had seen the wealth and ancient traditions of Egypt, and perhaps, in Cleopatra, a glimpse of a different kind of monarchy, one that stood in stark contrast to the Roman Republic's ideals. His subsequent actions in Rome, consolidating power and adopting increasingly monarchical tendencies, led many Romans to view him with suspicion, a suspicion perhaps fueled by his association with the exotic queen of the East. 2 years later, in 46 BC, Cleopatra made her first official visit to Rome, a truly momentous occasion. She arrived not as a conquered queen, but as an honored ally, accompanied by her young brother-husband, Ptolemy XIV, and her son, Caesarion. Caesar housed her in his private villa across the Tiber, a deliberate act that caused considerable scandal among the Roman elite. Rome, a city built on republican values, was deeply uncomfortable with the presence of an Eastern monarch, particularly one so closely associated with Caesar. She was a living symbol of his increasing autocratic tendencies, and her presence challenged Roman sensibilities. Imagine the spectacle: the opulent Egyptian retinue, the exotic gifts, the quill. Herself, dressed in the finest silks and jewels, moving through the streets of Rome, a city accustomed to military triumphs and senatorial debates, not the grandeur of Eastern courts. Her presence was a constant reminder of Caesar's power and his unconventional choices. She met with Roman dignitaries, scholars, and artists, and her intelligence and charm, coupled with her royal status, left a lasting impression. She was even present when Caesar dedicated a golden statue of himself in the Temple of Venus Genitrix, the patron goddess of his family, a move that further fueled fears of his monarchical ambitions. During her time in Rome, Ptolemy XIV, her co-ruler, died. While the cause is uncertain, many whispered that Cleopatra had orchestrated his demise, clearing the way for Caesarion to eventually rule alongside her, further solidifying her power and her son's claim. This was the ruthless side of Cleopatra, a queen who understood the brutal necessities of power and succession. Her stay in Rome lasted until 44 BC, a period of intense political upheaval. Caesar, having consolidated immense power, was making reforms that alienated many in the Roman Senate. He was declared dictator for life, a title that sounded too much like a king to many staunch Republicans. Cleopatra, living openly as his consort, became a lightning rod for criticism. Seen by some as an Eastern temptress corrupting Roman values and influencing Caesar towards tyranny. Then, on the Ides of March, 44 BC, the unthinkable happened. Julius Caesar was assassinated by a conspiracy of senators, led by Brutus and Cassius, who believed they were saving the Republic from a tyrant. The news must have shattered Cleopatra's world. The man who had been her protector, her lover, the father of her son, was gone. Her position in Rome became untenable. Without Caesar, she was vulnerable, and the Roman populace, already suspicious of her, would not tolerate her continued presence. She fled Rome swiftly, returning to Egypt with Caesarion. The dream of a unified Roman-Egyptian empire, or at least a powerful alliance, built upon their personal bond, lay in ruins. The political landscape of Rome plunged into chaos, a power vacuum that would lead to another round of brutal civil wars. Cleopatra, once again, found herself navigating treacherous waters, her future and that of her kingdom uncertain. She had lost her greatest ally, and now she had to prepare for the inevitable rise of new Roman powers, and the difficult choices she would have to make to ensure the survival of her dynasty and her beloved Egypt. The serpent, having entwined herself with the lion, now found herself alone, facing a world in turmoil. The scent of jasmine and the distant murmur of the Nile breezes filled the air as Cleopatra, now firmly back on her throne, began to weave the intricate tapestry of her reign. The fleeting, yet profoundly impactful presence of Julius Caesar had not only secured her position, but had also ignited a new vision for Egypt, one intertwined with the burgeoning power of Rome. She was no longer just a young queen fighting for survival. She was the pharaoh, the living goddess, the intellectual monarch poised to restore her kingdom's ancient glory. Her relationship with Caesar, born of political necessity and perhaps a genuine, if complicated, affection, had reshaped her understanding of power. She had seen firsthand the vast machinery of Roman governance, the relentless ambition of its leaders, and the strategic brilliance that had forged an empire. From Caesar, she learned not just military tactics, but also the art of diplomacy, the subtle dance of negotiation, and the importance of presenting an image of unassailable authority. With Caesar's departure, Cleopatra set about consolidating her power with a quiet intensity. She focused on the internal stability of Egypt, understanding that a strong domestic foundation was essential for her long-term ambitions. Alexandria, already a beacon of learning, flourished further under her patronage. The Great Library, a jewel of the ancient world, received renewed support, its scrolls meticulously preserved and its scholars encouraged. She herself was a polyglot, fluent in at least 7 languages, a rarity among Ptolemaic rulers who often clung to their Greek heritage. This linguistic prowess allowed her to converse directly with foreign emissaries, a skill that undoubtedly impressed and disarmed her counterparts. Her intellect was not merely academic, it was deeply practical. She delved into matters of state with an astonishing grasp of detail. From agricultural policies to naval logistics, she understood the vital importance of the Nile's annual inundation, ensuring that the intricate system of canals and irrigation networks was maintained to maximize crop yields. Prosperity, she knew, was the bedrock of a stable kingdom, and a well-fed populace was a loyal one. Yet, the shadow of Rome, though temporarily receded, never truly left her consciousness. She knew that her alliance with Caesar was a temporary reprieve, not a permanent solution. The Roman Republic was a volatile entity, its internal politics a swirling tempest of ambition and rivalry. When news reached Alexandria of Caesar's assassination on the Ides of March in 44 BCE, a chill must have swept through the royal palace. The man who had been her protector, her lover, and the father of her son, Caesarion, was gone. The carefully constructed edifice of her security seemed to tremble. The period following Caesar's death was one of immense uncertainty. Rome plunged into a series of civil wars as various factions vied for control. Cleopatra, ever the pragmatist, understood that she could not afford to align herself too closely with any single Roman general until the dust settled. She maintained a delicate neutrality, observing the unfolding drama from afar, her network of spies and informants keeping her abreast of every shift in power. It was during this tumultuous time that another formidable Roman figure emerged, Mark Antony. A charismatic and seasoned general, Antony was one of the triumvirs who came to power after Caesar's death, alongside Octavian and Lepidus. As the eastern territories of the Roman world fell under Antony's purview, it became inevitable that their paths would cross. In 41 BCE, Antony summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus, in modern-day Turkey, ostensibly to account for her loyalty to Rome during the recent conflicts. Cleopatra, however, was not one to be summoned like a common provincial governor. She understood the power of spectacle, the psychological impact of a grand entrance. She arrived not as a supplicant, but a goddess. Her arrival in Tarsus is one of the most enduring images of her legend. She sailed up the Cydnus River on a gilded barge, its sails dyed purple, its stern adorned with silver. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense, and musicians played flutes and lyres. Cleopatra herself was dressed as Aphrodite, the goddess of love, attended by cupids and nymphs. The sheer audacity, the theatricality of it, was designed to overwhelm and captivate. Antony, who had been waiting on shore, was utterly mesmerized. This meeting marked the beginning of another pivotal relationship in Cleopatra's life. Unlike Caesar, who was primarily a military and political strategist, Antony was a man of grand passions, a lover of luxury, and a general accustomed to absolute command. Their connection was immediate and intense. Antony was captivated by her intelligence, her wit, and her ability to converse on any subject, from philosophy to military strategy. She, in turn, found in him a powerful protector and a partner who appreciated her regal bearing and intellectual depth. Their love affair blossomed, a blend of political alliance, personal affection, and strategic maneuvering. Antony spent the winter of 41 to 40 BCE in Alexandria with Cleopatra, indulging in lavish feasts, intellectual discussions, and the pleasures of the Egyptian court. They were said to have formed a society called the Inimitable Livers, dedicated to pleasure and revelry. Yet beneath the surface of their opulent lifestyle, serious political calculations were being made. Cleopatra saw in Antony the potential to restore Egypt's former glory and expand its influence. She envisioned a powerful Eastern empire, with Egypt at its heart, supported by Roman might. Antony, on the other hand, saw in Cleopatra not just a beautiful and intelligent woman, but also the immense wealth of Egypt, a crucial resource for his ongoing struggle for dominance within Rome. He needed her gold, her grain, and her ships to fund his legions and maintain his position against his rival, Octavian. Their union produced 3 children, the twins Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene II, and later Ptolemy Philadelphus. These children were a testament to the depth of their bond, but also a bold political statement. By having children with a Roman triumvir, Cleopatra was further cementing her dynasty's ties to the most powerful force in the Mediterranean. Historians still debate the true nature of their relationship. Was it a genuine, passionate love affair, or a calculated political alliance? Perhaps it was a complex blend of both. The ancient sources, often biased by Roman propaganda, tend to portray Cleopatra as a seductive temptress who ensnared the noble Roman general. However, a closer look reveals a partnership between 2 powerful individuals who recognized and respected each other's strengths. Cleopatra was not merely a passive object of desire. She was an active participant, a shrewd negotiator who used her intellect and charm to further her kingdom's interests. One lesser-known detail about Cleopatra's reign during this period is her keen interest in medicine and pharmacology. She was said to have conducted experiments with poisons and antidotes, not for malicious purposes, but to understand their effects and potentially develop remedies. This interest reflects her broader intellectual curiosity and her practical approach to knowledge, seeking to apply it for the benefit of her people, or perhaps for her own protection in a dangerous world. As Antony's power grew in the east, so too did Cleopatra's influence. Antony granted her vast territories, including parts of Syria, Cilicia, and even Crete, effectively restoring much of the Ptolemaic Empire's ancient dominion. These grants, known as the Donations of Alexandria in 34 BCE, were a clear declaration of their joint vision for an Eastern empire, and they deeply alarmed Octavian in Rome. Octavian, a master of propaganda, seized upon these actions to paint Antony as a man corrupted by an Oriental queen, a Roman general who had abandoned his duties and his Roman heritage for the allure of Egypt. He portrayed Cleopatra as a foreign threat, a sorceress who sought to undermine Roman values and establish a despotic monarchy. This narrative resonated with many in Rome, who viewed the East with a mixture of fascination and suspicion. The tension between Octavian and Antony escalated, culminating in a final, decisive confrontation. The stage was set for a clash that would determine the future of the Roman world and, by extension, the fate of Egypt and Cleopatra. The decisive moment arrived at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. The naval engagement off the coast of Greece was a disaster for Antony and Cleopatra. While the specifics of the battle are debated, some ancient sources claim Cleopatra fled prematurely, leading to Antony's retreat. The outcome was undeniable. Octavian's forces, led by his skilled general Agrippa, achieved a decisive victory. The combined fleets of Antony and Cleopatra were shattered, and their legions on land were soon compelled to surrender. The defeat at Actium was a crushing blow. It signaled the end of Antony's political ambitions and, more importantly, the end of Cleopatra's dream of an independent, powerful Egypt aligned with a friendly Roman partner. They retreated to Egypt. Their once unassailable position now precarious, their hopes for a shared empire in ruins. The final act of their tragic drama unfolded in Alexandria. Octavian pursued them relentlessly, his legions closing in. As Octavian's forces breached the defenses of Alexandria, Antony, receiving false news of Cleopatra's death, fell on his own sword. He was brought to Cleopatra, dying in her arms, a poignant end to a tumultuous love story. Cleopatra, now a prisoner in her own palace, faced an impossible choice. She knew Octavian intended to parade her through the streets of Rome as a trophy, a symbol of his triumph over the East. This humiliation was anathema to her. She was a pharaoh, a goddess, and she would not suffer such indignity. The exact details of her death remain shrouded in a degree of mystery, though the most widely accepted account involves an asp. Legend says she arranged for a basket of figs to be brought to her, within which a venomous Egyptian cobra was hidden. She allowed the snake to bite her, choosing death over dishonor. The venom of the asp, a symbol of divine royalty in ancient Egypt, offered a swift and relatively painless end, a final act of defiance against her conqueror. Her death in August of 30 BCE marked the end of the Ptolemaic Dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries since the time of Alexander the Great. Egypt became a Roman province, directly administered by Octavian, who soon after adopted the title of Augustus and became the first Roman emperor. Cleopatra's legacy is complex and multifaceted. She was a brilliant ruler, a shrewd politician, and a captivating personality. Her story, however, has often been filtered through the lens of Roman propaganda, which sought to demonize her as a foreign temptress who led a noble Roman astray. Yet, beneath the layers of myth and prejudice emerges the portrait of a woman of extraordinary intellect, ambition, and resilience. She fought fiercely for her kingdom, using every tool at her disposal, her charm, her intelligence, her strategic alliances, to preserve its independence and restore its ancient glory. Perhaps her greatest tragedy was not her personal demise, but the ultimate failure to secure the long-term sovereignty of the land she so passionately ruled. Her reign, though ending in defeat, remains a testament to a queen who dared to challenge the rising tide of Roman power, a queen who truly was the last pharaoh of Egypt. The year 44 BCE dawned with a fragile peace, yet beneath its surface, the currents of Roman power churned with dangerous intensity. Julius Caesar, the towering figure who had brought Cleopatra to such prominence, now stood at the zenith of his power, a dictator for life. His ambition, however, had begun to cast a long, unsettling shadow over the traditional republican ideals of Rome. Whispers of kingship, of a perpetual tyranny, rippled through the Senate, stirring fear and resentment among those who cherished the old ways. Cleopatra, residing still in Caesar's luxurious gardens across the Tiber, was acutely aware of these shifting sands. She had seen firsthand the ruthless efficiency with which Roman power operated, and she understood that her own position, and indeed the future of Egypt, was inextricably linked to Caesar's fate. Her son, Caesarion, now a toddler, was a living testament to this bond, a tangible symbol of the unprecedented alliance between Rome's most powerful man and Egypt's ancient throne. Yet the very strength of this bond made her vulnerable. Should Caesar fall, what would become of his Egyptian queen and their child? The answer came with brutal swiftness on the Ides of March, the 15th day of March, 44 BCE. On that fateful morning, as Caesar entered the theater of Pompeii for a Senate meeting, a conspiracy of senators, numbering more than 60, surrounded him. Among them were men he had pardoned, men he had elevated, and even his close friend, Marcus Junius Brutus. The air, perhaps still crisp with the lingering chill of winter, must have suddenly grown heavy with unspoken tension. One senator, Lucius Tillius Cimber, approached Caesar with a petition, distracting him, and then, as if on cue, pulled down his toga, signaling the attack. The first dagger struck, and then another, and another. Caesar, it is said, initially resisted, but upon seeing Brutus among his assailants, uttered his famous, anguished words, "Et tu, Brute," before succumbing to 23 stab wounds. He fell at the foot of a statue of Pompey, his former rival, in a chilling tableau of fate's ironic hand. The news of Caesar's assassination must have reached Cleopatra like a thunderclap, shattering the fragile edifice of her security. The man who had been her protector, her lover, and the guarantor of her son's future, was gone. Rome, plunged into chaos, was no longer a safe haven. The assassins, deluded in their belief that they had restored the Republic, found themselves facing a populace enraged by Caesar's death and a political vacuum that threatened to engulf the entire Roman world. Cleopatra, with Caesarion, made the swift, pragmatic decision to leave Rome. The city, once a place of triumph and quiet intimacy, had become a den of vipers. Her presence, a symbol of Caesar's perceived monarchical ambitions, would only draw unwanted attention and danger. The journey back to Alexandria, across the vast expanse of the Mediterranean, must have been fraught with anxiety. The familiar shores of Egypt, once a source of comfort, now represented an uncertain future. The Ptolemaic Dynasty, though ancient, was fragile, its survival often dependent on the whims of Roman power. Now, with the architect of her reign gone, Cleopatra had to navigate this treacherous new landscape alone. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra found herself in a precarious position. The Roman Republic, now a battleground for Caesar's avengers and his assassins, was fracturing. Three dominant figures emerged from the ashes of Caesar's death. Marcus Antonius, or Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general and trusted lieutenant. Gaius Octavius, Caesar's grandnephew, whom Caesar had posthumously adopted as his son and heir in his will. And Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, another of Caesar's generals. These three men, initially united by a desire to avenge Caesar and restore order, formed the Second Triumvirate, a legally sanctioned dictatorship that would eventually tear Rome apart. Cleopatra's immediate challenge was to secure her position and that of Caesarion. She knew that her claim to the throne and Caesarion's legitimacy rested heavily on her ability to forge new alliances with the rising powers in Rome. She had to choose a side, or rather, ensure that whatever side emerged victorious would see value in maintaining Egypt's stability under her rule. For a time, she maintained a cautious neutrality, observing the unfolding civil war from afar, her spies no doubt feeding her intelligence from every corner of the Mediterranean. The initial conflict pitted the triumvirs against the conspirators, Brutus and Cassius, who had fled Rome and were raising armies in the east. Cleopatra, ever the pragmatist, understood that her support, in terms of Egypt's vast wealth and grain supplies, would be a crucial asset to either side. However, she also knew that outright commitment too early could be disastrous if her chosen side lost. Historians still debate the extent of her initial involvement. Some sources suggest she attempted to send a fleet to aid the triumvirs, but it was scattered by a storm. Others argue she deliberately delayed, waiting to see who would gain the upper hand. The decisive battle came at Philippi in Macedonia in 42 BCE. In two fierce engagements, the armies of Antony and Octavian crushed the forces of Brutus and Cassius. Both conspirators, facing utter defeat, committed suicide. With their deaths, the avengers of Caesar had triumphed, and the Roman world was now divided among the triumvirs. Antony, having played the decisive role in the victory at Philippi, took responsibility for managing the eastern provinces, including Egypt. This turn of events set the stage for the most famous and fateful encounter of Cleopatra's life. Antony, a charismatic and formidable general, possessed a reputation for both military prowess and a love of luxury. He was a man of immense charm, a captivating orator, and a formidable warrior. After Philippi, he embarked on a tour of the eastern provinces, seeking to consolidate power, levy taxes, and secure loyalty. It was during this tour that he summoned Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, modern-day Turkey. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, understood the immense importance of this summons. It was not merely a meeting. It was a test, an opportunity to re-establish her influence and secure Egypt's future. She knew Antony's reputation, his love of spectacle, and his susceptibility to beauty and charm. She also knew that he was a man of immense power, and that her survival depended on securing his favor. Her arrival in Tarsus became legendary, a carefully orchestrated display of wealth, power, and theatrical flair. Instead of arriving humbly, she chose to make a grand entrance, one designed to awe and impress. She sailed up the Cydnus River on a magnificent barge, its stern gilded, its sails of purple silk, and its oars of silver. The oars, it is said, beat time to the music of flutes and lyres. Filling the air with a sweet melody, the queen herself lay beneath a canopy of gold-embroidered cloth, dressed as Aphrodite, the goddess of love, surrounded by attendants disguised as cupids, fanning her and nereids attending to her. The air was heavy with the scent of burning incense, wafting from the vessel to the riverbanks. The spectacle was so captivating that the entire population of Tarsus, including Antony himself, abandoned their duties and rushed to the riverbanks to witness her arrival. Antony, who had expected her to come to him, was instead compelled to come to her. This subtle reversal of power dynamics, achieved through sheer theatrical brilliance, immediately established Cleopatra's formidable presence. Their first meeting, as depicted by ancient historians like Plutarch, was a dance of wits and wills. Antony, initially intending to assert his authority, found himself captivated by Cleopatra's intelligence, her wit, and her ability to converse on a vast array of subjects, from philosophy to politics. She was not merely beautiful, she was intellectually stimulating, a woman who could hold her own in any discussion. She spoke multiple languages, a rare feat even for monarchs of her time, and possessed a deep understanding of Roman politics and the intricacies of the Eastern world. Their relationship quickly deepened beyond mere political alliance. Antony, perhaps weary of Roman austerity and drawn to the exotic allure of Egypt, found himself increasingly enamored with the queen. Their affair began, marking the start of one of history's most famous and consequential love stories. For Cleopatra, this relationship was not merely one of passion. It was a crucial strategic alliance. Antony, was the most powerful man in the East, and his support guaranteed Egypt's security and her dynasty's continuation. She offered him not only her charm and intellect, but also the immense resources of Egypt, particularly its grain, which was vital for feeding Rome and its armies. Antony spent the winter of 41 to 40 BCE in Alexandria with Cleopatra, indulging in a life of luxury and pleasure. They formed a convivial drinking club known as the Inimitable Livers, engaging in lavish banquets, games, and playful escapades through the city. Antony, a man of simple tastes when on campaign, seemed to revel in the opulence and intellectual stimulation offered by the Egyptian court. This period, while seemingly one of hedonistic enjoyment, also served a political purpose. It solidified their bond, creating a personal loyalty that transcended mere diplomatic agreements. During this time, Cleopatra became pregnant with twins by Antony, a boy named Alexander Helios and a girl named Cleopatra Selene. These children further cemented her connection to Antony, creating a powerful dynastic link between the Ptolemaic line and one of Rome's most influential figures. For Cleopatra, these children were not only a source of personal joy, but also a strategic investment in her future and the future of Egypt. However, their idyllic winter was not without its shadows. News of Antony's prolonged stay in Egypt and his apparent devotion to Cleopatra began to filter back to Rome. Octavian, Antony's co-triumvir, was a shrewd and ambitious politician, and he viewed Antony's relationship with Cleopatra with increasing suspicion and hostility. He understood that Antony's deep entanglement with Egypt could undermine his own power and threaten the delicate balance of the triumvirate. Roman public opinion, already wary of foreign queens and Eastern influences, began to turn against Antony. The Roman political landscape was a constant maelstrom of shifting alliances and betrayals. While Antony was in Egypt, events in Rome forced his return. His wife Fulvia and his brother Lucius Antonius had engaged in a rebellion against Octavian, known as the Perusian War. Though they were defeated, Antony's presence was required to restore order and mend the fractured relationship within the triumvirate. Cleopatra, understanding the exigencies of Roman politics, allowed Antony to depart, though perhaps with a heavy heart. She knew that his return to Rome was necessary, but she also understood the dangers posed by Octavian's growing influence and the conservative Roman sentiment against her. Antony, upon his return to Rome, was forced to make a political marriage to Octavia, Octavian's sister, in an attempt to solidify the triumvirate and appease public opinion. This marriage, while a political necessity, must have been a bitter pill for Cleopatra to swallow, a stark reminder of the precarious nature of her position. For the next few years, Antony remained largely in the West, engaged in military campaigns and political maneuvering. Cleopatra remained in Egypt, consolidating her power, raising her children, and patiently awaiting Antony's return. She continued to manage Egypt's vast resources, ensuring its prosperity, and maintaining its strategic importance to Rome. She knew that her value to Antony and to Rome lay in Egypt's stability and wealth. The peace between Antony and Octavian, however, was tenuous at best. Their rivalry simmered beneath the surface, fueled by ambition and mutual distrust. Antony, despite his marriage to Octavia, never truly abandoned his connection to Cleopatra. He continued to rely on Egypt's resources for his military campaigns in the East, particularly his ill-fated Parthian campaign. This campaign, designed to avenge Crassus's defeat and secure Roman glory, proved to be a costly failure. further eroding Antony's standing in Rome. As the years passed, the chasm between Antony and Octavian widened. Octavian, a master of propaganda, skillfully exploited Antony's relationship with Cleopatra to portray him as a man corrupted by Eastern luxury and enslaved by a foreign queen. He painted Cleopatra as a dangerous sorceress, an ambitious monarch seeking to undermine Rome and establish an Eastern empire. These accusations, though largely exaggerated, resonated with the Roman populace, who harbored deep-seated prejudices against foreign influence. The final rupture came in 32 BCE. Antony, increasingly reliant on Cleopatra and the resources of Egypt, divorced Octavia and publicly acknowledged his children with Cleopatra. He also made a series of controversial territorial grants to Cleopatra and their children, known as the Donations of Alexandria. These donations, which included vast swathes of Roman-controlled territory in the east, were seen by Octavian and the Roman Senate as an outrageous betrayal of Roman interests and a clear indication of Antony's intention to establish an Eastern monarchy with Cleopatra at its head. Octavian seized upon these actions as a pretext for war. He declared war not on Antony directly, but on Cleopatra, framing the conflict as a defense of Roman honor against a foreign aggressor. This clever maneuver allowed him to rally Roman sentiment against Cleopatra, effectively isolating Antony and forcing him to choose between Rome and Egypt. Antony, by this point deeply committed to Cleopatra and his vision for the East, chose to stand with her. The stage was set for the final, cataclysmic confrontation that would determine the fate of Rome, Egypt, and the ancient world. The vast resources of Egypt, its navy, its grain, and its wealth were now fully committed to Antony's cause. Cleopatra, the queen who had navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics for decades, now stood at the precipice of her greatest challenge, facing the full might of Rome under the cunning leadership of Octavian. The gentle whispers of the Nile, which had cradled her dynasty for centuries, now seemed to murmur with the ominous sounds of an approaching storm. The sun, a relentless eye in the Egyptian sky, continued its slow journey across the heavens, casting long, shifting shadows over the ancient land. It was a sun that had witnessed countless pharaohs rise and fall, and now it shone upon a queen whose destiny was becoming inextricably linked with Rome's own tumultuous fate. The assassination of Julius Caesar had plunged the Republic into a new, brutal civil war, a conflict that would ultimately reshape the known world. Amidst this chaos, three powerful men emerged to carve up the Roman sphere of influence: Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir; Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, a seasoned general and politician; and Mark Antony, Caesar's most trusted lieutenant and a formidable military commander in his own right. This triumvirate, forged in the fires of ambition and vengeance, sought to restore order, or rather, to establish their own. Cleopatra, ever the shrewd strategist, understood the shifting sands of power. With Caesar gone, her position, though seemingly secure, was precarious. Her son, Caesarion, was a living testament to her bond with the fallen dictator, a claim that Octavian, Caesar's chosen heir, viewed with growing suspicion. It was imperative that she align herself with the strongest faction, and in the wake of Caesar's death, that faction was embodied by Mark Antony. He was a man of immense charisma, a gifted orator, and a soldier renowned for his courage and leadership. After the decisive Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE, where Antony and Octavian crushed the forces of Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius, Antony took charge of the eastern provinces of the Roman Republic. It was from this position of power that he summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus, in modern-day Turkey, in 41 BCE. The summons was ostensibly to answer for her alleged support of Caesar's assassins, a charge that was almost certainly a pretext. Antony, like Caesar before him, undoubtedly wished to assess this legendary queen for himself, to secure Egypt's vast wealth and grain supply for his campaigns, and perhaps to simply satisfy his curiosity. Cleopatra, however, did not merely answer a summons. She orchestrated an entrance designed to dazzle and disarm. She arrived not as a supplicant, but as a goddess, a living embodiment of luxury and power. Her barge, famously described by ancient writers like Plutarch, was a spectacle of unparalleled splendor. Its stern was gilded, its sails were dyed purple, and its oars were made of silver, beating time to the music of flutes and lyres. She reclined under a canopy of gold-threaded cloth, dressed as Aphrodite, the goddess of love, while her attendants, dressed as Cupids and Nereids, fanned her and ministered to her every need. The air around her was heavy with the scent of burning incense, carried on the gentle breeze from the perfumed braziers on board. This arrival was not mere extravagance, it was a calculated political maneuver. Antony, waiting on shore, was instantly captivated. He, a man accustomed to the rough camaraderie of soldiers and the austere power of Roman politics, was confronted with a vision of exotic beauty and theatrical grandeur that transcended anything he had ever known. The initial meeting, as recounted by Plutarch, saw Antony, despite his supreme authority, compelled to go to Cleopatra's ship rather than her coming to him. This subtle shift in power dynamics, orchestrated by Cleopatra, set the tone for their relationship. Their connection deepened rapidly. Cleopatra, with her sharp intellect, her mastery of multiple languages, and her captivating presence, proved to be far more than a beautiful face. She engaged Antony in intellectual discussions, shared lavish banquets, and captivated him with her wit and charm. Antony, a man of strong appetites and a love for revelry, found in Cleopatra a kindred spirit, someone who could match his zest for life and his ambition. Their romance, unlike Caesar's brief liaison, was a more profound and enduring partnership, one that intertwined their personal lives with the grand tapestry of Roman politics. Historians still debate the true nature of their affection. Was it a genuine, passionate love, or a pragmatic alliance born of political necessity? Perhaps it was both. For Antony, Cleopatra represented access to Egypt's immense resources, a secure base in the east, and a queen who could bear him children, further solidifying his connection to a powerful kingdom. For Cleopatra, Antony was her shield against Octavian, her pathway to securing Egypt's independence, and a means to expand her influence within the Roman sphere. Their bond, however it began, quickly became the stuff of legend, a partnership that challenged the very foundations of the Roman Republic. Their relationship was cemented by the birth of their children, twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, born in 40 BCE, and later Ptolemy Philadelphus, born in 36 BCE. These children were a powerful symbol of their union, a living testament to their shared future. While Antony was married to Octavia, Octavian's sister, his devotion to Cleopatra grew increasingly evident. He spent more and more time in Alexandria, embracing the opulent lifestyle of the Ptolemaic court, much to the dismay and disapproval of his Roman peers. The donations of Alexandria in 34 BCE marked a critical turning point. In a grand public ceremony, Antony, dressed as the god Dionysus, and Cleopatra as Isis, proclaimed their children as rulers of vast territories. Caesarion was declared King of Kings and co-ruler with his mother of Egypt and Cyprus. Alexander Helios was granted Armenia, Media, and Parthia, lands yet to be conquered. Cleopatra Selene received Cyrenaica and Libya, and Ptolemy Philadelphus was given Syria and Cilicia. This audacious act, effectively carving up Roman provinces and gifting them to his children with a foreign queen, was seen by Octavian and many Romans as an unforgivable betrayal, a direct challenge to Roman authority, and a dangerous deviation from Roman tradition. This event, more than any other, solidified Octavian's propaganda campaign against Antony. He painted Antony as a man corrupted by Eastern luxury, enslaved by a foreign temptress, and abandoning his Roman duties for a life of decadence. Cleopatra was demonized as a sorceress, a seductress who had ensnared a great Roman general and was actively seeking to undermine the Republic. The Roman public, already wary of foreign influence, was easily swayed by these narratives. The tension between Octavian and Antony escalated, fueled by personal animosity and political ambition. Antony's divorce of Octavia in 32 BCE was the final insult, a public repudiation of his ties to Rome and to Octavian's family. Octavian, seizing the moment, dramatically read Antony's will, which he had supposedly obtained from the Vestal Virgins in Rome, to the Roman Senate. The will allegedly confirmed Antony's desire to be buried in Alexandria alongside Cleopatra, the final act that further outraged Roman sensibilities and solidified the perception that he had abandoned his Roman identity. The stage was set for the final, cataclysmic confrontation. Octavian declared war, not directly on Antony, but on Cleopatra, cleverly framing the conflict as a defense of Rome against a foreign threat. The ensuing war culminated in the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, a naval engagement off the western coast of Greece. The details of the battle are complex and debated, but the outcome was decisive. Antony and Cleopatra's forces suffered a crushing defeat. Historians still ponder the strategic decisions made during the battle. Some suggest Cleopatra's early departure with her fleet, followed by Antony, was a tactical blunder, perhaps an attempt to break through the blockade or a panicked retreat. Others argue it was a prearranged escape plan that went awry. Regardless, their flight from Actium signaled the end of their military power and the ending of their final tragic act. They returned to Egypt, their empire crumbling around them. Antony, once the mighty general, was a broken man, consumed by despair. Cleopatra, ever resilient, attempted to rebuild her forces and negotiate with Octavian. But her efforts were in vain. Octavian pursued them relentlessly, determined to capture both Antony and Cleopatra and parade them as trophies in his triumphal procession in Rome. The end came swiftly. As Octavian's forces closed in on Alexandria in 30 BCE, Antony, receiving a false report of Cleopatra's death, fell on his own sword. He did not die immediately, but was brought to Cleopatra, who had barricaded herself in the monument she had built for herself. In a poignant and tragic scene, he died in her arms, his life ending not on a battlefield, but in the embrace of the woman for whom he had sacrificed everything. Cleopatra, now alone and facing inevitable capture, refused to be humiliated. She attempted one last negotiation with Octavian, perhaps hoping to secure her children's future. But it was clear her fate was sealed. On August 12, 30 BCE, with Octavian's guards approaching, she took her own life. The traditional account, widely accepted, is that she used an asp, a venomous Egyptian cobra, to bite herself, choosing a death that would elevate her to the status of a goddess in keeping with her divine lineage. The exact method, however, remains a subtle historical mystery. While Plutarch and Cassius Dio describe the asp, some modern scholars have proposed other possibilities, such as a poisoned comb or needle, given the unlikelihood of a snake being smuggled in unnoticed. Regardless of the precise means, her death was a defiant act of self-determination, a final assertion of her regal will against the conquering Roman power. With Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemaic Dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, came to an end. Egypt, the last great Hellenistic kingdom, became a Roman province, directly under the control of Octavian, who would soon transform the Republic into an empire, becoming its first emperor, Augustus. Caesarion, Cleopatra's son by Julius Caesar, was captured and executed on Octavian's orders, eliminating any potential rival to his claim as Caesar's heir. Cleopatra's other children by Antony were spared and brought to Rome, raised by Octavia, a testament to Roman pragmatism, or perhaps a subtle act of mercy. The fall of Cleopatra and Antony marked the definitive end of the Roman Republic and the dawn of the Roman Empire. Their story, a tapestry woven with threads of love, ambition, betrayal, and war, resonated through the ages. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, became a figure of enduring fascination, a woman who, through her intellect, charm, and strategic brilliance, captivated the most powerful men of her era and shaped the course of history. Her legacy, often viewed through the lens of Roman propaganda, is one of a powerful queen who fought fiercely for her kingdom's independence, a woman who dared to challenge the might of Rome, and in doing so became an immortal legend. The desert winds continued to whisper across the sands, carrying the echoes of a lost empire, a queen's defiance, and a love that defied the world. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Alexandrian sky in hues of fiery orange and soft violet, a different kind of light began to glow within the city's royal palace. It was the light of shared ambition, of 2 powerful wills intertwined, that now illuminated the lives of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Their initial alliance, forged in the crucible of political necessity, had deepened into something far more profound. It was a bond built not just on strategic advantage, but on a mutual respect for intellect, a shared love for the arts and sciences, and a devotion that blossomed amidst the escalating tensions with Rome. Antony, once the hardened Roman general, found himself increasingly captivated by Cleopatra's world. He embraced the Egyptian customs, delighted in the intellectual discourse that flowed freely in her court, and perhaps, for the first time in his tumultuous life, felt truly understood. Cleopatra, in turn, saw in Antony not just a formidable ally, but a man capable of great loyalty, and beneath his warrior's exterior, a surprising tenderness. They were often seen together, not just in the grand halls of state, but in quieter moments, strolling through the palace gardens, their laughter echoing softly among the ancient trees. It was during these years, between roughly 41 and 34 BCE, that their relationship solidified, producing 3 children, the twins Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, and later, Ptolemy Philadelphus. These children were more than just heirs. They were living symbols of a burgeoning dynasty, a testament to the dreams of a unified East under their joint rule. Yet, this deepening devotion was not without its shadows. In Rome, the political landscape was shifting dramatically. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and Antony's co-triumvir, skillfully cultivated an image of himself as the virtuous Roman, the defender of traditional values. he seized upon Antony's prolonged stay in Egypt, his embrace of Egyptian customs, and his relationship with Cleopatra, portraying them as signs of moral decay and a betrayal of Roman ideals. Propaganda flowed freely, painting Cleopatra as a seductive sorceress who had ensnared a great Roman general, leading him astray from his duties. It was a narrative designed to turn Roman public opinion against Antony, to undermine his authority, and to pave the way for Octavian's sole ascent to power. One lesser-known detail from this period concerns the donations of Alexandria in 34 BCE. This grand ceremony, held in the Gymnasium of Alexandria, was a public declaration of Antony and Cleopatra's imperial vision. Before a vast crowd, Antony proclaimed Cleopatra as the Queen of Kings and Caesarion, her son by Julius Caesar, as the King of Kings. Their children by Antony were also given significant territories. Alexander Helios was declared King of Armenia, Media, and Parthia. Cleopatra Selene was made ruler of Cyrenaica and Libya, and Ptolemy Philadelphus was granted Syria and Cilicia. This act, a bold assertion of their power and a clear challenge to Rome's traditional dominance, was met with outrage in the Roman Senate. It was seen as an open declaration of war, a blatant attempt to establish an independent Eastern empire that would rival and perhaps even eclipse Rome itself. The tension escalated, a slow, inexorable buildup to an inevitable clash. Octavian, ever the shrewd politician, used the donations of Alexandria as definitive proof of Antony's disloyalty. He declared war not on Antony directly, but on Cleopatra, framing it as a war against a foreign queen who threatened Roman sovereignty. This clever maneuver allowed him to rally Roman citizens under the banner of defending their homeland, rather than engaging in a civil war against a fellow Roman. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Antony and Cleopatra, with their combined forces, moved to Greece, establishing their headquarters at Actium, a promontory on the western coast. Their fleet, though impressive in size, was a diverse collection of ships, some built for battle, others for transport, and many manned by sailors with varying degrees of experience. Antony's strategy, historians still debate, was whether to engage in a decisive land battle or to rely on a naval confrontation. Some scholars argue that Antony, a seasoned land commander, preferred to draw Octavian's forces into a ground engagement, where his legions might have an advantage. Others suggest that Cleopatra, with her extensive naval resources and perhaps a greater understanding of the sea, pushed for a naval engagement, believing it offered a quicker, more decisive victory. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a complex interplay of strategic considerations and differing perspectives within their command. The naval Battle of Actium, fought on September 2nd, 31 BCE, was the culmination of these rising tensions. The air was thick with the scent of salt and anticipation. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet, numbering around 500 ships, faced Octavian's fleet of roughly 400, commanded by his brilliant admiral, Agrippa. The battle itself was chaotic and brutal. The Roman ships, though fewer in number, were more agile and better equipped for ramming and boarding. Cleopatra's flagship, the Antonia, was reportedly a magnificent vessel, adorned with purple sails, a symbol of her royal power. As the battle raged and the tide seemed to turn against Antony's forces, a pivotal moment occurred. Cleopatra, with her squadron of 60 ships, broke through the Roman lines and sailed away, heading south towards Egypt. The reasons for Cleopatra's departure remain one of history's enduring mysteries. Was it a planned strategic retreat, an attempt to save her fleet for a later engagement? Or was it a desperate escape, a recognition that the battle was lost, and her only hope was to preserve her own life and that of her children? Antony, witnessing her departure, made a fateful decision. He abandoned his flagship and followed her, leaving his remaining forces to fight on without their supreme commander. His departure demoralized his troops, and the battle quickly turned into a rout. The defeat at Actium was catastrophic for Antony and Cleopatra. It shattered their naval power, decimated their army, and effectively ended their hopes of establishing an independent empire. The aftermath of Actium was a slow, agonizing retreat. Antony and Cleopatra returned to Egypt, their once unshakable confidence now replaced by a chilling realization of their impending doom. They attempted to rally support, to raise new armies, but the momentum had shifted irrevocably. Octavian, with his decisive victory, was now the undisputed master of the Roman world. He pursued them relentlessly, his legions sweeping across the eastern Mediterranean. In Alexandria, the city that had once celebrated their triumphs, a sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. The vibrant energy that had defined Cleopatra's court began to wane, replaced by a desperate scramble for survival. Antony, deeply affected by the defeat and the perceived betrayal of his troops, became increasingly despondent. He heard false reports of Cleopatra's death, and in a moment of profound despair, attempted to take his own life. He fell on his sword, but the wound was not immediately fatal. He was then carried to Cleopatra, who had barricaded herself in a monument, fearing capture. Their final moments together are steeped in tragedy and enduring legend. Antony, bleeding and dying, was hoisted up to Cleopatra through a window, a poignant image of their desperate, final embrace. He died in her arms, his last breath exhaled in the presence of the woman he had loved and fought for. Cleopatra, now truly alone, faced the inevitable. She knew that Octavian intended to parade her through the streets of Rome as a captive, a symbol of his ultimate triumph. This humiliation, she resolved, she would never endure. On August 12, 30 BCE, with Octavian's forces closing in, Cleopatra chose her own destiny. The exact method of her death has been debated for centuries, but the most widely accepted account is that she used an asp, a venomous Egyptian cobra, to bite herself. Perhaps the snake was smuggled in a basket of figs, its presence concealed until the opportune moment. It was a death steeped in symbolism, an embrace of her Egyptian heritage, a final act of defiance against her Roman conqueror. Her two loyal handmaidens, Eris and Charmian, reportedly died by her side, a testament to their unwavering devotion. With Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemaic Dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, came to an end. Egypt was absorbed into the Roman Empire, becoming a Roman province. The dreams of an Eastern Empire, of a unified world under the rule of Antony and Cleopatra, vanished like smoke. Octavian, now Augustus Caesar, became the first Roman emperor, ushering in an era of unprecedented peace and stability for Rome, known as the Pax Romana. Yet, even in their defeat, the story of Antony and Cleopatra endured. Their love, their ambition, and their tragic downfall became the stuff of legend, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and drama throughout history. Their shared devotion, born amidst the rising tide of Roman power, ultimately led to a clash of empires that reshaped the ancient world. Their lives, though cut short by the relentless march of history, left an indelible mark, whispering tales of passion and power across the millennia. Perhaps the desert winds still carry echoes of their laughter, and the Nile, in its eternal flow, remembers the last queen of Egypt and the Roman general who loved her. The sun, a molten disk, began its slow descent, painting the Ionian Sea in hues of orange and bruised purple. It was September 2nd, 31 BCE, and the stage was set for a confrontation that would ripple through history, determining not just the fate of two lovers, but the very trajectory of the Roman world. Antony, with Cleopatra and her formidable fleet by his side, faced Octavian's forces in the narrow straits off Actium, a promontory in Greece. The air hummed with an almost unbearable tension, a silent prelude to the storm. Antony's strategy, or perhaps his desperation, led him to a naval engagement despite his clear disadvantage. His legions, though vast, were largely untested, and his naval forces, while numerous, were composed of heavy, slow ships, some still under construction and manned by inexperienced crews. Octavian, by contrast, commanded a fleet of smaller, swifter vessels, expertly handled by his skilled admiral, Agrippa. These ships, known as Liburnians, were designed for speed and maneuverability, capable of darting in, ramming, and withdrawing before Antony's behemoths could respond. Cleopatra's presence at Actium was a testament to her unwavering commitment to Antony, and perhaps to her own survival. Her 60 ships, gilded and adorned, were positioned behind Antony's main line, laden with her personal treasure. Some historians argue that her primary role was to provide financial backing and a strategic escape route should the battle turn sour. Others suggest she was there as a full, active participant, her very presence a symbol of the East's challenge to Roman dominance. This is a point of enduring debate among scholars. Was Cleopatra's fleet a vital combatant force, or primarily a logistical and escape asset? The answer shapes our understanding of her role in the battle's unfolding tragedy. As the morning mist burned away, the two fleets engaged. The clash of wood against wood, the snap of sails, the roar of men, and the thud of ballista bolts filled the air. Antony's larger ships, though formidable in appearance, struggled to maneuver in the confined space. Agrippa's Liburnians danced around them, darting in to disable rudders, snap oars, and set sails ablaze with flaming arrows. The sheer weight of Antony's vessels meant they were difficult to board, but their very size made them vulnerable targets. The battle raged for hours, a chaotic ballet of destruction. Antony's forces, despite their initial numerical superiority, began to falter. The smaller, faster Roman ships were like relentless gnats, stinging and retreating, slowly but surely dismantling Antony's grand fleet. The heat of the day intensified, adding to the exhaustion and despair. Then, a pivotal moment arrived, shrouded in controversy and speculation. Cleopatra, seeing the tide of battle turning decisively against Antony, made a fateful decision. With her 60 ships, sails unfurled, she broke through the lines and headed south, away from the fray, toward the open sea. The wind, it is said, was in her favor, carrying her swiftly away from the carnage. Antony, witnessing her departure, was faced with an impossible choice. His heart, it seemed, pulled him after her. He abandoned his flagship, transferring to a smaller, faster vessel, and followed Cleopatra's retreating sails, leaving his remaining forces to their grim fate. This act of abandonment, though perhaps born of love or a desperate attempt to regroup, was seen by many as an unforgivable betrayal. His men, witnessing their commander's flight, lost morale. The battle quickly devolved into a rout. Many of Antony's ships were captured or destroyed. and thousands of his soldiers perished or surrendered. The immediate aftermath of Actium was devastating for Antony. His remaining land forces, leaderless and demoralized, soon defected to Octavian. The dream of an Eastern empire, of a unified world under his and Cleopatra's rule, shattered like pottery dropped from a great height. The news of the defeat spread like wildfire, reaching Rome and echoing through the provinces, solidifying Octavian's position as the undisputed master of the Roman world. Cleopatra, having reached safety, awaited Antony in Egypt. The journey back was surely filled with a chilling silence, punctuated only by the lapping of waves against the hull. What thoughts consumed her during those days at sea? Was it regret, fear, or a desperate hope for a new strategy? We can only imagine the weight of the moment pressing down upon her. Upon their return to Alexandria, a city once vibrant with their shared ambition, a profound sense of foreboding settled. They attempted to project an image of strength and normalcy, even celebrating the coming of age of their son, Caesarion, declaring him co-ruler with Cleopatra. But the facade was thin, a fragile veil over a looming catastrophe. They knew Octavian would come, and soon. Antony, in particular, seemed to descend into a deep melancholy. He spent his days in quiet despair, withdrawing from public life, while Cleopatra, ever the pragmatist, began to make preparations for the inevitable. She considered fleeing further south, perhaps to India, with her remaining treasure, but the logistics proved insurmountable. Her ships were too few, her allies too distant. Octavian, ever meticulous, did not rush. He consolidated his power in the west, ensuring no further opposition would arise before turning his full attention to Egypt. He understood the symbolic importance of Cleopatra and Antony. Their defeat at Actium was military, but their capture would be a political triumph of immense magnitude, allowing him to present himself as the savior of Rome, the unifier who had vanquished the foreign queen and her corrupted Roman general. By the summer of 30 BCE, Octavian's legions stood at the gates of Alexandria. The air, once filled with the scent of spices and the murmur of trade, now carried the metallic tang of fear. Antony, rousing himself from his despondency, attempted a final, desperate stand. He led his remaining forces in a land battle outside the city, but the outcome was predetermined. His cavalry deserted him, and his infantry was easily overwhelmed. The once mighty general, who had commanded legions and ruled vast territories, was reduced to a hunted man. In the chaos, a terrible misunderstanding occurred. Antony received word, likely false, that Cleopatra had taken her own life. Devastated by this news, and unwilling to face the humiliation of capture, he fell upon his own sword. The wound, however, was not immediately fatal. He was carried, bleeding and in agony, to the monument where Cleopatra had taken refuge, hoping for one last embrace. The scene that followed is etched in history's memory, a poignant end to a tumultuous love story. Cleopatra, fearing Octavian's capture, had barricaded herself in her mausoleum with her most trusted attendants and her treasure. Antony, hoisted up to a window, died in her arms. The details are grim, yet infused with a tragic beauty. The general, once so powerful, breathing his last in the embrace of the queen he had loved, their world crumbling around them. This moment, often romanticized, highlights the profound personal cost of their political ambitions. Octavian, upon hearing of Antony's death, was said to have shed tears, perhaps genuine, perhaps for show. He understood that his greatest rival was gone, and the path to absolute power was now clear. His immediate concern, however, was Cleopatra. He desperately wanted her alive, not just for the immense treasure she possessed, but for the ultimate humiliation of parading her through the streets of Rome in his triumphal procession. It would be the ultimate symbol of his victory. A tangible representation of Rome's triumph over the East. Cleopatra, though grieving and weakened, still possessed her formidable intellect and cunning. She allowed herself to be captured, but not without resistance. She attempted to charm Octavian, to weave her magic, just as she had with Caesar and Antony. She presented herself as a queen, not a prisoner, and even tried to negotiate for her children's futures. She knew the power of her presence, the allure she held, and she used it as her final weapon. Octavian, however, was impervious to her charms. He was younger, colder, and utterly focused on his political agenda. He treated her with a detached courtesy, ensuring her comfort, but never allowing her to forget her status as his captive. He assigned a freedman, Epaphroditus, to guard her, ensuring she would not escape or take her own life before his grand procession. But Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, had no intention of being paraded as a trophy. She understood the profound indignity, the ultimate loss of dignity, that such a spectacle would entail. She had lived her life as a queen, and she would die as one. The precise method of her death remains a subject of fascination and some scholarly debate. The most widely accepted account, immortalized in literature and art, is that she chose to die by the bite of an asp, a venomous Egyptian cobra. The story goes that she received a basket of figs within which the snake was concealed. She allowed it to bite her, choosing a swift, relatively painless, and symbolically potent death. The asp was a sacred symbol in Egypt, associated with royalty and divinity. By choosing this method, she was not only escaping Octavian's humiliation, but also reclaiming her power, transforming her death into an act of defiance and a return to her divine heritage. Some modern historians, however, question the asp theory. They point to the practical difficulties of smuggling a venomous snake into a closely guarded chamber, and the fact that an asp's bite is not always quick or painless. They suggest she might have used a potent poison, perhaps one she had long prepared. Yet the imagery of the asp, the queen embracing her fate with a serpent, has proven far more enduring in the collective imagination. Regardless of the exact means, her intent was clear: to die on her own terms, preserving her dignity in the face of utter defeat. When Octavian's guards finally entered her chambers, they found her dead, lying peacefully on her couch, dressed in her royal robes. Her two loyal handmaidens, Iris and Charmian, were also found dead beside her, having chosen to follow their queen into the afterlife. It was August 12, 30 BCE, a mere 11 months after the Battle of Actium. With Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemaic Dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, came to an end. Egypt, the breadbasket of the Roman world, became a Roman province, directly administered by Octavian, who would soon become Augustus, the first Roman emperor. The vast wealth of Egypt, including Cleopatra's personal treasury, flowed into Rome, funding Octavian's reforms and solidifying his new imperial order. The children of Antony and Cleopatra were spared, though their fates were varied. Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene were brought to Rome and raised by Octavia, Antony's estranged wife and Octavian's sister. A testament to Octavian's political astuteness and his desire to project an image of clemency. Ptolemy Philadelphus, the youngest, is believed to have died young. Caesarion, Cleopatra's son by Julius Caesar, was not so fortunate. Octavian, fearing that Caesarion could become a rallying point for opposition, had him executed, famously stating, Too many Caesars is not a good thing. The fall of Antony and Cleopatra marked a profound turning point in history. It wasn't merely the end of a powerful love affair or the collapse of a kingdom. It was the final act in the Roman Republic's long, bloody civil wars. Octavian's victory at Actium and his subsequent conquest of Egypt ushered in the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and stability that would last for 2 centuries under the Roman Empire. Cleopatra's legacy, however, transcends. Ended her defeat. She became a figure of enduring fascination, a symbol of exotic power, beauty, and tragic love. Roman propaganda, eager to demonize her and justify Octavian's actions, painted her as a seductive temptress who had corrupted a noble Roman. Yet even in these hostile portrayals, her intelligence, her ambition, and her unwavering spirit shone through. Her story, whispered through the ages, continues to captivate. The woman who mastered languages, commanded fleets, and held the hearts of 2 of the most powerful men in the Roman world remains an enigma, a complex tapestry of strength and vulnerability. Her name, Cleopatra, still evokes images of ancient Egypt, of gilded barges on the Nile, and of a queen who dared to challenge the might of Rome, even if it meant her own tragic end. Her star, though it faded in the glare of Octavian's rising sun, never truly extinguished. It continued to glow in the firmament of history, a beacon of an extraordinary life lived against an epic backdrop, a story that resonates with us even today. The sun, once a golden ally, now beat down with a relentless, oppressive heat upon Alexandria. The air, thick with the scent of dust and the distant murmur of an encroaching army, seemed to press in on Cleopatra, even within the cool, shadowed confines of her palace. News arrived daily, each dispatch a fresh wound. Antony, her beloved, her lion, was faltering. His forces, once formidable, were being systematically dismantled by Octavian's methodical advance. The naval battle at Actium, a catastrophe of unimaginable scale, had shattered their fleet, leaving the sea lanes open for Octavian's legions to sweep across the Mediterranean. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, had tried to salvage what little hope remained. She had even attempted to drag her ships across the narrow Isthmus of Suez, a desperate bid to reach the Red Sea and perhaps find refuge or even a new beginning in distant lands. But the desert, vast and unforgiving, had swallowed that ambition whole. The ships, heavy and cumbersome, had been abandoned, their timbers baking under the unforgiving sun, monuments to a dream that had evaporated like morning dew. As Octavian's forces closed in, encircling Alexandria, the city held its breath. Antony, in a fit of despair and perhaps a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control, had launched a final, ill-fated attack. It was a skirmish, not a battle, quickly repelled, and it served only to underscore the futility of their position. The whispers in the palace grew louder, the loyalty of some courtiers wavering like reeds in a strong wind. Cleopatra, acutely aware of the shifting allegiances, began to prepare for the inevitable. She had always been a survivor, a queen who understood the delicate dance between power and vulnerability. One morning, the news that would shatter her world arrived. Antony, believing her dead, had fallen upon his own sword. The details were gruesome, a testament to his desperation and the depth of his love, or perhaps his despair. He had not died instantly. Instead, gravely wounded, he had been carried to the monument where Cleopatra had taken refuge, a grand tomb she had built for herself, filled with treasures, a final sanctuary. She had refused to open the main doors, fearing capture, but had allowed him to be hoisted up through a window. Imagine the scene: Antony, bleeding, weak, pulled up to meet her gaze one last time, to die in her arms. It was a moment of profound tragedy, a private agony witnessed only by a few loyal attendants. He died there, in her embrace, his last breath a whisper of her name. With Antony gone, a profound stillness settled upon Cleopatra. The roaring storms of war seemed to recede, replaced by a chilling calm. Octavian, ever the pragmatist, sent emissaries. He wanted her alive, not out of mercy, but for a spectacle. He envisioned her, the legendary Queen of the Nile, paraded through the streets of Rome in his triumph, a living trophy of his victory. This fate, to be humiliated, to be stripped of her dignity, and paraded before her conqueror's jubilant crowds, was a prospect more terrifying than death itself. Cleopatra began to negotiate, feigning compliance. She allowed herself to be taken, though she retained her regal bearing, her eyes still holding that unyielding fire. She met with Octavian, her beauty and intellect still formidable, even in defeat. She tried to charm him, to sway him, as she had swayed Caesar and Antony. But Octavian was different. He was cold, calculating, impervious to her allure. He offered her vague promises, but his intent was clear. During these final days, confined within her palace, though under guard, Cleopatra was allowed some semblance of her former life. She bathed, she dressed in her finest robes, she prepared for her final act. She understood that her legacy, her very essence, depended on how she chose to end her story. To be dragged through Rome would be to have her narrative rewritten by her enemy, to be forever remembered. Appealed to her own ending. To die on her own terms would be an act of ultimate defiance, preserving her image as a sovereign. Historians still debate the exact details of her final moments. The traditional account, immortalized by Plutarch and later by Shakespeare, speaks of the asp, a venomous Egyptian cobra, smuggled to her in a basket of figs. Was it truly an asp, or perhaps a small, venomous snake, easier to conceal? Some scholars suggest she might have used a potent poison, quick and painless, to ensure her death was swift and certain, rather than risking the prolonged agony of a snakebite. The idea of the asp, however, holds a powerful symbolic weight, a creature sacred to Egypt, delivering her from Roman subjugation. It was a poetic end, a final embrace of her Egyptian identity. The accounts suggest that she dismissed her attendants, save for two loyal handmaidens, Eros and Charmian. She dressed herself in her royal regalia, her crown upon her head, her finest jewels adorning her. She lay upon her bed, a queen even in her final moments, and allowed the snake to bite her. Perhaps it was on her arm or her breast, as tradition holds. Her handmaidens, it is said, also chose to die with her, an ultimate act of loyalty. When Octavian's guards burst in, alerted by the silence, they found her dead, serene and regal, a faint smile on her lips. Charmian, moments from death herself, was reportedly asked by a guard if this was well done. Her reply, defiant to the last, was, "It is well done and fitting for a queen descended from so many kings." Cleopatra died on August 12, 30 BC, at the age of 39. Her death marked the end of the Ptolemaic Dynasty, a lineage that had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, since the time of Alexander the Great. With her passing, Egypt became a Roman province, its vast wealth and fertile lands now under the direct control of Octavian, soon to be Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Her burial was a quiet affair, a stark contrast to the grandeur of her life. Octavian, perhaps out of a grudging respect, or simply to avoid further unrest, allowed her to be buried alongside Antony. Their tombs, once intended as monuments to their eternal love and power, became silent witnesses to the end of an era. The exact location of their burial site remains one of history's enduring mysteries. Perhaps their resting place lies hidden beneath the shifting sands of Alexandria, waiting to be rediscovered, or perhaps forever lost to time, their secrets guarded by the very earth that swallowed them. The story of Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, is not just a tale of political maneuvering, love affairs, and tragic defeat. It is a story of a woman who, against overwhelming odds, fought to preserve her kingdom, her legacy, and her very identity. She navigated a world dominated by powerful men, using her intellect, her charm, and her strategic brilliance to hold on to power for as long as possible. She was a living bridge between the ancient world of pharaohs and the emerging might of Rome, a figure who embodied the clash of cultures and the inexorable march of history. Her choices, particularly in her final moments, ensured that she would be remembered not as a conquered captive, but as a queen who chose her own destiny, even in death. Her legend, embellished and debated through the centuries, continues to captivate, a testament to her enduring power and the profound impact she had on the course of human events. The sun, a relentless eye in the Egyptian sky, continued its slow descent, casting long, fractured shadows across Alexandria. Yet within the palace walls, a different kind of shadow had fallen. Antony, the once mighty triumvir, lay dying, his wounds from the Battle of Actium and the subsequent land battles proving mortal. Cleopatra, her own heart a battlefield of grief and despair, received the news, her spirit though battered, still unbroken. She sent messengers to him, pleading for one last meeting, but it was too late. He was carried to her, or so the accounts suggest, breathing his last in her arms, or perhaps just outside her sanctuary, his final gaze fixed upon the woman for whom he had sacrificed an empire. This moment, steeped in tragedy, marked not just the end of a passionate, tumultuous love affair, but the true beginning of the end for Ptolemaic Egypt. Octavian, the victor, now approached Alexandria, his legions a tide of disciplined might. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, had not yet abandoned hope. She sent envoys to Octavian, not as a broken queen, but as a sovereign seeking terms. She offered him her kingdom, provided her children could inherit it. Octavian, however, had his own agenda. He desired not just Egypt, but Cleopatra herself as a magnificent prize to parade through the streets of Rome in his triumphal procession. This was an indignity she could not, would not, bear. As Octavian's forces encircled the city, Cleopatra retreated to her mausoleum, a grand structure she had commissioned, filled with treasures and perhaps the instruments of her final choice. Whispers reached Octavian that she had taken her own life, a rumor she may have deliberately fostered to gauge his reaction. He sent his trusted freedman, Epaphroditus, and later his general, Proculius, to secure her. The accounts differ slightly here, but the essence remains. Proculius, using a ladder, scaled the walls of the mausoleum, or perhaps entered through a hidden passage, catching Cleopatra by surprise. She was disarmed, taken into custody, and treated with a certain deference, though always under guard. Octavian himself visited her, a meeting shrouded in diplomatic formality and underlying tension. She presented him with lists of her treasures, attempting to conceal some, but her treasurer, Philostratos, betrayed her, revealing her deceptions. Yet even in this vulnerable state, she retained a certain regal defiance. The days that followed were a torment of gilded captivity. Cleopatra understood Octavian's intentions. She knew the fate that awaited her: public humiliation, paraded as a captive queen, a symbol of Rome's triumph over the East. This was a fate far worse than death for a woman of her pride and lineage. She made one last, desperate attempt to appeal to Octavian, perhaps hoping to charm him, as she had Caesar and Antony. But Octavian was not swayed by her beauty or her intellect. He was a colder, more calculating force, driven by ambition and the desire for absolute power. It was in these final days, perhaps around August 12, 30 BCE, that Cleopatra made her ultimate decision. The precise details of her death remain a subject of historical debate and enduring fascination. The most widely accepted account, popularized by Plutarch and Dio Cassius, involves the asp, a small venomous Egyptian cobra. It is said that she received the snake, or perhaps two of them, in a basket of figs, smuggled past her Roman guards. Some versions suggest she tested the snake on a servant first, to ensure its potency. Others describe her calmly applying it to her breast, or perhaps her arm, allowing its venom to course through her veins, bringing a swift, relatively painless end. However, there are other theories. Some historians argue that the asp story, while dramatic, might be a romanticized fabrication. The venom of an asp, while deadly, can be slow and agonizing, and it's difficult to imagine a snake being smuggled in such a way without detection, especially given the strict Roman surveillance. Alternative theories suggest she might have used a potent poison, perhaps hemlock or opium, which would have offered a more controlled and dignified exit. The Roman poet Horace, for instance, mentions her fierce resolve and her refusal to be led in triumph, but doesn't explicitly name the asp. The lack of clear, unambiguous physical evidence at the scene has fueled this scholarly dispute for centuries. Did she truly choose the symbolic death of the asp, linking her fate to the sacred serpents of Egypt, or was it a more practical, yet equally determined act of suicide by other means? We may never know for certain, and perhaps that ambiguity only adds to her mystique. What is certain is that when the Roman guards finally broke into her chambers, they found her lifeless, attended by her two loyal handmaidens, Iris and Charmian, who also lay dead or dying beside her. Charmian, it is said, was found adjusting Cleopatra's diadem, a final act of devotion and defiance, ensuring her queen appeared regal even in death. Octavian, though perhaps disappointed at being denied his grand spectacle, ordered her buried alongside Antony, a final, grudging respect for the queen who had challenged him. With Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemaic Dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, came to an abrupt and definitive end. Egypt, the ancient land of pharaohs and gods, now became a Roman province, governed directly by Octavian's appointed prefects. Its vast wealth, particularly its abundant grain supply, became a vital resource for the Roman Empire, feeding its legions and its burgeoning population. The Roman presence transformed Egypt, integrating it into a vast imperial network, yet its ancient rhythms and beliefs continued to pulse beneath the surface, adapting to the new overlords. Cleopatra's children, save for Caesarion, met various fates. Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar, was captured and executed on Octavian's orders, a final, chilling act to eliminate any potential rival to the Julian lineage. Antony's children by Cleopatra, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus, were taken to Rome. Cleopatra Selene, the only one to survive to adulthood, was eventually married to Juba II of Mauritania, a client king. And together, they ruled a prosperous kingdom in North Africa, carrying a sliver of her mother's royal blood into a new era. The legacy of Cleopatra VII, however, transcended the fall of her dynasty and the absorption of her kingdom. She became, almost immediately, a figure of legend. For the Romans, She was often portrayed as a dangerous seductress, an exotic temptress who had almost derailed the course of their empire. Yet even in their condemnation, there was an undeniable fascination. For later generations, she became a symbol of powerful womanhood, a brilliant strategist, a polyglot queen who dared to challenge the might of Rome. Her story, passed down through the centuries, embellished and reimagined, has been told and retold in countless plays, poems, paintings, and films. From Shakespeare's tragic heroine to modern interpretations, her image has shifted and evolved, reflecting the changing perceptions of power, gender, and destiny. Her name, Cleopatra, continues to evoke images of a bygone era, of a world where East met West, where ancient traditions clashed with burgeoning empires. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt, a queen who lived and died on her own terms, leaving behind not just a historical record, but an enduring myth that continues to whisper across the sands of time, a testament to a life lived with audacious ambition, profound love, and ultimately an unyielding will. The Roman Empire, under Octavian, soon to be Augustus, would usher in an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity, the Pax Romana. But the memory of the queen who defied them, the Queen of the Nile, would forever be etched into the annals of history.